So as God would have it, my longtime mentor and consultant, Tony Gray, to the rescue again, calls me up. Oh, brother, what you doing at lunch? I said, working as usual every day, 7 days a week, 24/7. He's like, can you make time to meet me up at BWI Rail Station in Baltimore? I said, yeah, of course, for you, yeah. So I get to Baltimore. It's Tony. It's the president of Intercity Broadcasting at the time that owned BLS. And it's Dion Livingston, the president general manager. So all three of them were sitting staring at me when I walk into the train station. They had taken Amtrak down from New York. So in the conversation, they said, look, we're not sure, but if we have something at BLS, are you interested? I said, yeah, just whatever. I said, I'll sweep the floors. I had never even dreamed of working for BLS. When I got there in 2008 to New York, Wendy Williams is doing afternoons. Jasmine Sanders is doing middays, who works with D.L. Hughley, his co-host today, for his syndicated show, and Steve Harvey in the morning. And that's when Steve was in New York like every other week. Vaughn Harper, legendary Quiet Storm host, was doing Quiet Storm. And so to see all of these people in the station at one time, it truly was mind-boggling. And over the years, had a chance to bring on Red Alert, Chuck Chillout, Marley Marl, people I grew up listening to mixtapes of, DJ Scratch. You know, it was just an experience for me that I can't even explain, but it was an everyday learning experience. And just to be in New York and to see what that station meant to people and continues to mean to people. It was just an incredible experience. This is why you try to get connected in your community. You support. When you can give a little money to something, you give it. You really try to be a steward of your community. I get an email Sunday night, random email from the president of the New York Urban League, Arva Rice, and we're a media partner today with the New York Urban League. And she said, Audacy across town, they're looking next door, really. We were a block away, this building from where Hot and BLS were at the time, LIB. She said, would you be interested in opportunities with Audacy? They want to up their management ranks. And I said, sure. And sent an email and wound up meeting for coffee in the West Village with the guy that is my boss to this day, Chris Oliveira. So I get a call literally a day before they launch. And it turns out it's 94.7 The Block. And they said, listen to it and call us back. They launched at 1 p.m. I was on the phone with them by 1:15. Let's go. October will be 5 years since this station launched. And it's hard to believe it's been a very fast 5 years. But for a new format to survive for 5 years is really monumental. And we're really just getting started in many ways.
Welcome to Prepare For Takeoff. I'm the creator and host, Terry L. Cyrus. We're the podcast dedicated to amplifying Black excellence. Every week, we sit down with a proven professional or a rising entrepreneur. This week, we're sitting down with Skip Dillard, brand manager for 94.7 The Block and format vice president for Audacy. Skip, what's going on?
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me on, Terry.
Thanks for making some time for us. I know you're a man with a busy schedule, doing your thing. Just wanted to give you your much-deserved flowers. You've been out here for a long time doing your thing in radio. And a lot of times when people hear about someone's story, such as yours, people don't always understand how they got there, right? So, okay, how do I ascend to the level that you've ascended to in radio? A lot of times people don't know. You may have a humble beginning, if you will, as far as how it all started for you. But also, I always talk about the importance of being intentional. Sooner than later, I would try to encourage whether young people, even people of a certain age, be intentional about what it is you want to accomplish. So with that being said, I know you were born in Queens, but you were raised in Greensboro, North Carolina, and you had an introduction to radio fairly early. So talk to me about what was it like growing up in North Carolina, realizing that you're from New York, and then how you transitioned into radio at such an early age.
Well, sure. I mean, I was, really mesmerized, I think, like all of us, with the rise of hip hop and, the Sugar Hill Gang and Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. But I really was taken by Grandmaster Flash because I was always into audio equipment. My grandfather had like the most elaborate stereo system I had ever seen as a kid. He had this big tube Fisher amplifier receiver, and he had a separate turntable and these big speakers from an old electronics store in New York called Lafayette Electronics. I think it was somewhere in Midtown or near 42nd Street. So I'd listen to him play his old records, Otis Redding and Miles Davis and John Coltrane, and the sound just sounded like the groups were in your living room. So I think from a very young age, I was fascinated by technical equipment, audio equipment, and recording studios. So I would always look at magazines like Stereophile and others. So anyway, when Grandmaster Flash hit, I saw him using turntables, and somebody told me, hey, those are Techniques turntables. So I was like, oh man, I want to learn how to mix. So over time, got my little equipment. Dad would buy me a piece of equipment for a good report card. And so over time, got my stuff together and started DJing team parties with a friend of mine, Mark Branch, who was getting ready to retire from NASA today. He's been there for 33 years. So we'd get out and we'd do parties and everything. And one day, my mother's friend had a daughter who ran A&T State University's radio station in North Carolina. And so after high school, when I get out of class, I'd go over and I'd observe her on air and doing afternoons on the station. And it was really exciting. And one day I won a contest for a mixtape and brought that over to the local AM station, WEAL in Greensboro. They played all the hip hop, so all the kids would tune in there. So I brought the tape over when I won, and they were going to put it on the air. So I made a clean tape for them of what I presented to them and brought it over. And so I saw the DJ talk to the listeners, guy I listened to it every afternoon. And I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. It'd be great to get a regular job when I get out of high school, go to college, and I can do this on the weekends. That's how I saw radio. So pretty much that was my introduction, I would say.
Growing up in West Virginia, didn't necessarily have a lot of pathways into music. We didn't even have a black radio station. And I was around people. Shout out to my boy DJ John Quick. He was a local DJ. I had an understanding from him as it pertains to what you could be as far as a DJ. It took me years before I realized that there was a business behind what I was hearing on the radio. There was a business behind who I was listening to on the record or who I was seeing perform on stage. And that was kind of what I came to know, my understanding as far as the business behind the business, if you will. And I think it's very imperative that people come to that realization sooner than later as it pertains to what it is they want to find themselves doing and be very intentional in that regard. So you fell in love with radio and you said that you had an introduction courtesy of your grandfather as it pertains to him having introduced you to records and things of that nature at an early age. Were you like some kind of a local celebrity among your peers as it pertains like, oh man, Skip's on the radio, he's doing his thing? Or was it just kind of like that of a hobby? Like people say, oh, that's cool.
Well, I can't say it was celebrity then, but people did know me because of my interest in music, my DJing. I'm a product truly when it comes to radio of college radio. After sitting in at North Carolina A&T State University, their station, WNAA, was actually accepted to Hampton University when I graduated from high school. And when I got there, I auditioned for the radio club and didn't make it the first time. I auditioned again and I made it. And so I was on WHOV, which still exists today. It was 88.3 then, 88.1 now when they got a bigger signal. And we had a great time. I mean, I really learned how to make the mistakes I needed to make in order to be successful. I had numerous great teachers. One there who took over the station my junior year, Frank Sheffield, actually has worked and managed many groups, including Loose Ends and others. Over the later years, he became a promoter and still does that today with various R&B groups. But he really, introduced us to Shaka Khan's of the world. He pushed us on listening to jazz and other popular forms of contemporary music. He knew we loved hip hop, but he wanted to also give us the full range of music. And I think that I received a lot of attention from professors and others because I had that knowledge from my grandfather.
Right.
My grandfather would always tell me, he said, those cats around today, David Sanborn and all them, they're okay, but they can't touch Coltrane. And I got to understand, But anyway, I think that probably, I guess, really getting known for it came my senior year. I needed an internship. And I tell this story to students all the time and adults too about just being prepared when opportunities land. I needed an internship and I put my air check of my college station in with my resume, and I sent it around to newspapers, to TV stations, to radio. And after a couple of weeks, I hadn't heard anything. And so get back from class, and there's a message under my door. Apparently, they had rung the payphone. Ron Atkins, at the time, who was program director of WOWI Norfolk. They're still at the top of the ratings today with, as a mainstream urban hip hop and all of that. But back then, it was the big thing. I mean, they were the station that all the students on campus listened to. And so I'm excited. I call the program director back. I spend all the laundry change I had. And Ron said, I finally picked up the phone. He says, Dillard. I said, yes, sir. He said, I hired this chick. I'm just telling you exactly as he said it. I
Right.
call women chicks. He said, I hired this chick for weekends and she won't show up. You ready for this weekend at 2 a.m.? Can you do 2 to 6 a.m.? I said, oh, man, yeah. Do I have the internship? Internship? So I'm offering you a job. I'm going to pay you. What's going on? You come and fill out the paperwork, train with the Quiet Storm guy. You'll be on this weekend. Yes, I just, and I didn't know what to say, but God just said, say you're ready. Yes, I'm ready. So you ready? I said, yes, I'm ready. I just okay, now I got to worry about it. We can be ready, but anyway, I went the next day, did fill out the paperwork, spent the evening with the Quiet Storm guy I listened to every night. So I think he was impressed that not only did I know him, but I went to bed every night listening. All of the girls on campus and the guys, we all listened to that station, especially when we were hanging with each other. So after, I came back the next night, sat with them again so I could learn how to run the board, could learn how they talk, where their liner, what they're reading, their promos, what the station's doing. So that weekend, while everybody was going to party on Friday, I'm going to bed at 6 p.m. so I can get up at 10 p.m. and drive over to Norfolk, Virginia, and be ready for my 2 a.m. The first few weeks, I felt horrible. They beat me up bad because I was green. I didn't know. I was a little college jock. But after roughly, I'd say about 8 weeks at it, they promoted me to a much easier shift of 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Sundays. And so all the students were like, hey, that's the man. He's oh, man, you're on the radio, So that was kind of different. But I think it was a great foundation after Ron left for a bigger job in New Orleans at WYLD. The national program director, Steve Crumley, who was amazing, also took me under his wing. He was the afternoons and took over for Ron's job as well. And Steve really, he was about the music. I mean, he listened to everything. He would often get records on that would become hits later. And that for me was really a great lesson in not being afraid of the music, finding the right songs. And when you find the right song, you know it's the right song, get it on the air. Don't worry about the record labels. Play the best music for the station, play the hits, play what's, all the videos that are out, play those records, of course, but also find those gems that you would know. And real quick for we end there, I'll give you an example. One morning, the music director at the time, Thomas Lytell, who later went on to work for Def Jam for 20 years and became very well known with both Leor and Kevin Lyles and everybody that, legendary in that company. So I'm on the air and Thomas comes in. He had been at the record store that morning and searching through the new music bins. And he's like, man, put this record on. I know you got your schedule of what you're supposed to play, but you need to put this on next. He's like, this is going to be the biggest thing in the world. So I put the record on and I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. Next thing I know, hotline's ringing. It's Steve, the PD. What are you doing? I said, why are you breaking format? You're a part-time. Why are you breaking format? I said, sir, I'm not breaking format. I said, Thomas Lytell just brought this record into me to play. He said, and it sounds really good. What is it? I said, it's soul to soul, keep on moving. It's like, this sounds damn good. Okay, G-Man, I'll check you later. Have a great day. Click. But that was what we went through. But it was really fun to be at that kind of station that, was really, really aggressive. Like they soul to soul, the British hits or whatever it was. If it was good R&B, they were 5-star, you name it. They would always find those gems, especially those you don't hear that much today. Just bang them into hits, and very often we're ahead of New York and Chicago and places you wouldn't think we would be ahead on. House music, very early to adapt that outside of Chicago and maybe Baltimore and New York. So
Mhm.
they were very much in tune with what was happening.
One of the things I always say, Skip, is it's always imperative that we take calculated risks. That was a calculated risk on your part at an early age. And I'm sure that those calculated risks continued after you left that market and you moved from market to market to market to eventually find yourself in New York. So what was the next stop that you made once you left that market?
Sure. Decided I got offered an opportunity to work at a local record store. I could continue at Wowie, and a local record store, and a classmate invited me to, get an apartment with him, and I could work and live in Norfolk. But I looked at everything and I said, you know what? My parents are 5 hours south and 4.5 hours south in Greensboro, North Carolina. I know everybody there. I grew up there since I was a kid. Let me go back to Greensboro and kind of see what's going on. And within a couple of weeks, my mother's friend's daughter called the program director at WQMG, big 100,000 watt station, still is at the top of the ratings today in Greensboro, North Carolina. One of the stations our company owns today, I work with them. And it's amazing that, it come full circle that, all these years later, that station would still be at the top of the ratings and I would still be with them. So I actually started at WQMG, stayed there, met Sam Weaver, who had also become very important in my career, met Tony Gray, big radio consultant, would also become a mentor and true friend to this day, both of them. And I went over and jumped ship to 102 Jams, which is owned by Audacy today, another station. Worked there. QMG and JMH still fight for number one and number two to this day. And it was the same way back then. The PD at 102 Jams, Brian Douglas, and he had a different way of training you. He would take us in his office and put on cassettes of old classic radio DJs. We're talking CKLW in Detroit, which was in Windsor, Ontario, and served the Detroit market. I would listen to Walt Baby Love, KHJ in Los Angeles, which was the pre-Kiss top 40 on AM. KFRC in San Francisco. I mean, I can go down, anybody who's a radio geek will know the call letters I mentioned, and legendary DJs. And he would play these people who were talking for 8 seconds, but yet telling you everything you wanted to know. They were setting up records. They were teasing promotions. That was when radio was bigger than life. It was the internet. It was streaming. It was everything. And those DJs had to be, male and female, the very, very true top of their game. We also listened to Howard Stern and how he would set up an interview with a guest. So through that, he would teach us how to structure a break. What is the point of my break? What do I want to say? How do I want to say it? How do I not be wordy? How do I get to the point so people know what I'm trying to say before they lose interest?
Mm-hmm.
So it just went so much for me a long way because I didn't know it, but I was a radio geek. And I always wondered, why are people so emotionally attached to this thing, to the DJs, to the music? I remembered hearing Michael Jackson Thriller for the first time. It was on radio. Billie Jean, first time on radio. Prince, When Doves Cry, and the excitement of the DJ telling us that record was coming up. And all of that came full circle under Brian. So literally, in under about 8 months, mutual friend, I'm talking to him, he said, hey man, I want to introduce you to somebody down in New Orleans. And it turned out to be another guy who became one of my best friends. We talk to this day, JoJo Walker. And he comes on and says, hey man, we had two DJs just leave for Miami for a station called Hot 105, and top station to this day. And we have a couple of openings in New Orleans. I'm going to move to afternoons. So they're looking for a night guy. And I was like, wow, New Orleans, that's a pretty large market.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sent my tape that I was doing overnights because we had somebody that was out on leave. And I happened to be doing overnights that week. So I recorded both of my shows and took the best one, sent the tape down the next day via FedEx after the second day, and got off on Friday morning. And I was ready for the weekend. And I'm laying down in bed, and all of a sudden, 11 a.m., phone starts ringing. And I'm like, oh, run, pick up the phone. It's the PD from New Orleans. And he said, hey, I'd like to fly you in and talk to you. And flew in. Turns out the consultant from WQMG that I had met actually consulted WYLD in New Orleans too. That station today, still number one. And had a huge legacy, was at one time Black owned by iHeart now. So that was how I got to the big time. For a first full-time job was in New Orleans, Louisiana, doing nights from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And it literally changed my life. I didn't know anybody there. In fact, a cousin of my father's moved back to the Carolinas maybe a month after I got there. I never had a chance to see her. She called me when I got there, and I called her back, and she had actually come by the station one day. I wasn't there yet and totally missed her. And next thing I looked up, they had gone, moved. So I didn't know anybody. But let me tell you, I got into the fabric of that market, wound up staying for 4.5 years, and after 2 years became program director of WYLD, which I'm proud of to this day, because many people tell me you'd never be PD of a station that big in your 20s. And I was. And as I learned so much and made so many damn mistakes too, but it was a lot of fun.
To be a PD at such an early age in a market that size is a huge accomplishment. You were in New Orleans, and then at some point you transitioned to another market. Was that Detroit? What market was that out of?
Detroit, yeah. Went to Detroit. That was a big gig. That was a WMXD. They're still top adult R&B leader to this day. That job came by accident. I had, decided after about 3 years I wanted to get out of New Orleans. I wanted to see what else was out there. Market didn't pay very well. Food was cheap, so I was also bigger than I should have been. I said, I need to get healthy, and I need to get off Bourbon Street, stop with the hurricanes, and find a wife. I was engaged at the time, but I had been kind of looking and just let me see what's out there. A few bites. A top 40 station in Philly at the time, they were interested. It didn't really pan out. A couple of other people contacted me, and I had an interview in Charlotte. I was really excited because Charlotte was an up-and-coming city, a little smaller than it is today, but it was exciting to think I would only be an hour and 20 minutes from my sister and my parents.
Mm-hmm.
It was wonderful, and everybody I knew. And I interviewed for that job and didn't get it. And that was a job I really wanted, WPEG. So I went home for Christmas, come back January, maybe about the 5th or 7th of January. I get a call. And it is Steve Hagewood. He runs Streets 94.5 in Atlanta, along with a network of other stations that he owns today. Back then, he was programming WJLB and was operations manager over WMXD. And he said, hey, I was looking over playlists as an answer machine. I said, hey, I was out. He said, hey, I was looking over playlists, and yours is one of the tightest I've seen. He said, out of ones I've looked at, he said, would you be interested in coming to program in Detroit? Immediately, and what's the number? He left them. So I called them, and actually it was kind of ironic. That same week I had gotten a call, and it was Epic Records, and they said, listen, we're going to fly 10 program directors in. We wanted to fly you for Luther Vandross is going to play through his album on the piano in his home in LA. He's like, we'd like to invite you as one of our program directors. So I was like, oh my God. So I was excited. So say, yeah, I'm going to do it. I can't wait to fly in on Friday, get you back on a Sunday, and we'll eat dinner in LA on Saturday. So I was all excited. They called me back from Detroit and said, we need you this weekend for the interview. I said, oh man, and never met Luther because of it. But look, that again, sometimes you sacrifice because, I probably, with that big a job at MXD, if you got an in, you got to take it now. Hey, well, after Luther, no, you got to go today. And so I went up for the interview, and certainly enough, got the job, got an offer literally about a week later. That was really, truly a really challenging 2 years because I had never been in that big a situation. Everybody was in their 30s or early 40s. So here's this pipsqueak coming in his mid-20s telling us what to do. Who does he think he is? But made some great friends there. Verna Green was the general manager, a Michigan State grad, and she ran WJLB and later MXD combined for probably 20 years and was a legendary leader, Black woman, and she was hard as nails. But it taught me what expectation is really about, what the will to win is really about, because she was all about winning. And if it didn't make dollars, it didn't make sense. And sometimes I said, oh my God, she picks on me. But she picked on everybody. She had sales managers ready to pull their hair out because her expectations were so high. So it made me understand what accountability really is. And by the way, Detroit, I was blessed. Detroit New Orleans, all of them. Detroit was just a fantastic city. And I worked there twice, and I can tell you Detroit is highly underrated and always disrespected. But the history there, the beauty of, in 1 minute you can be in a city setting, next minute you can be on a lake so clean you feel like you can drink the water right out of it. Michigan is a very beautiful state, very unique state, and I had a chance to really enjoy the people, the culture, great food. I can tell everybody, if you're sleeping on Detroit, you're sleeping. It's definitely, that was a wonderful experience for me.
Thinking about starting your own business? Make it real with Shopify, the all-in-one platform trusted by millions to sell online and in person, whether it's merch, art, or digital goods. Shopify gives you the tools to build, grow, and succeed. And here's the best part. When you sign up using the affiliate link in our show notes, you're supporting Prepare For Takeoff and starting your business off right. Click the link and start your free trial today. Detroit has a lot of rich history, Motown, and realizing that was one of the highest concentrated markets for people of color.
Oh, yeah.
So to be on the radio in a market that size with that kind of concentration as far as people of color is huge. Like you mentioned, to be a PD and be programming what people were listening to, and you're still in your 20s. Like, what was it about your ability to program that made you stand out? That's a skill set in and of itself, and it's something that accumulates over time. So what was it that prompted you to find that sweet spot, if you will?
I think for me, really, it was understanding. First of all, it was a curiosity as the science of radio, how you connect with people, what makes a station a living, breathing entity. It's more than just music. Everybody has access to the same music. But it's the bringing a sense of community, a sense of connection, being a companion. The companionship of radio is everything. We are your companion. Not many platforms can boast that you listen to us and invite us into your shower. You invite us into your bedroom. You invite us into your living room your kitchen while you're having a cup of coffee or tea in the morning. You invite us into your living room. You invite us into your car. How many people pick up a stranger along the way in their car? They sure pick up radio in their car when they're by themselves or with family. And so I was always curious about that. Number two, I was very curious as to how research for radio works. I'm not a numbers person. I'm not a great math person, but I enjoy the data. And I enjoy when it's explained to me from not being a math person, how that all comes together. And I think also it's just that I enjoy people. I enjoy the community aspect the most of radio, because I think that, we are, our license mandates, we serve the community. So we don't have an excuse. There's no general manager in the business that can say we don't have to worry about the community. There's no sales manager that says, hey, we don't have to worry about the community. It's part of our mission. And, probably the best reason I can tell you as to why I loved radio so much in New Orleans, when I first started, we had a crisis. David Duke, the former Grand Wizard of the Klan, was running for governor of Louisiana. And I started that year when he was running. And I remember, today it'd be hard to do because you got to get insurance. And David Duke had actually sued. We'd be sued today because we were doing voter registrations, and David Duke sued because we weren't registering Republicans. We were like, well, we're registering whoever walks up. Most of the people we're registering are, the Democratic Party was the only party that offered to come out with the station. Today it'd be very hard to do that. But we rented buses and used our station vans to take people to vote around New Orleans that didn't have cars. And I remember lifting a woman with one of the other jocks into one of the vans, and she had no legs. She was in a wheelchair. And we were taking her to go vote. Sat there while Roll took her out, helped her get out rolled her out of the van and took her to vote. Waited till she finished voting and rolled her right back in the van and took her home, dropped her off in the projects in New Orleans. And I said, this is why I got into this business, because, to think we can make that much of a difference. And when the results came in and David Duke didn't win, Edwin Edwards won governorship, Democrat, we were like, whew, because Duke said what he was going to do. He was going to shut everything down. It was going to be, it was going to be like a Stephen Miller today. That was what they were getting ready to do to us, even, at that time in Louisiana. It's bad today. You can imagine what it was. It was similarly bad at that time. So that experience really gave me kind of a mission. And I said, man, if I can make a difference for people and fight for the rights of underserved communities, of women, of health issues, health disparities, economic disparities, all of which YLD was doing at that time, it was Black owned. I said, geez, this is the right business to be in. And that really, for me, I think, gave me a secret weapon as a program director, and that's community.
I feel the same way, man. It's a matter of being connected with the community, not forgetting where you came from, and all of the connections that I've made over the years. That's what really fuels me, man. It's about how can I help other people. It's never about me. It's never about what I stand to gain. It's all about how can I serve others. And you have that same mission in the work you do and all of the work you've done with the stations, man. It's all about the collective. I always subscribe to the African proverb as it relates to if you want to get somewhere fast, you can go alone. But if you want to get somewhere far, you have to go with others. And you've truly gone with others. You've had a lot of success. And then you went from Detroit. And then what market did you find yourself in after that?
So I got let go in Detroit after about a year and a half. I was green and really was in over my head at times. And at that point, they just didn't have the time to really teach me what I didn't know. I, at first was, kind of curious. I wasn't sure if I wanted to take it. I was looking at other jobs. I wanted to stay in Detroit, but received an offer from BLK in Buffalo, another legacy heritage radio station. Huge signal, covers Southern Ontario and parts of Toronto. At that time, the station actually had a sales office on Yonge Street. And I talked to a few people and they said, look, it's such a big station, it's such a big signal. The money they offered is less because it's Buffalo. It's not the size of Detroit at the time. So you'll take a little pay cut, but you won't even miss it because, it'll cost you much cheaper to live in Buffalo than Detroit at the time. So I took the gig and wound up meeting my wife there and stayed there 6.5 years. And another great experience. I was in Toronto. We had live broadcast in Canada every weekend. I got to see the rise of Canada's first urban station because we were doing so well there. We were making at one point about, I think our biggest year there, we billed about 835,000 in sales revenue. And so after that, the Canadian version of the FCC, the CRTC, got together with a Black entrepreneur, Caribbean, Denham Jolly. And they said, you know what? We're going to have to stop these folks from the U.S. from coming up here and taking all this revenue. And so they launched an urban station literally next to our frequency and blocked us out of parts of Toronto. And that was how they got in. And we were sad about it, but at the same time, we doubled down our efforts in Buffalo and still did business in Canada. They still do some minor stuff today, not much. But for me, it was, I think every market has its uniqueness, and Buffalo is no different. They have a smaller but very active Black community there, and also very, very big we R&B and hip hop. I enjoyed having a very multicultural audience, from white to Latino. Very supportive of that station. We even shared audience with a country station there, WYRK. It was so strong. And so, having a very multicultural blend of audience really enjoyed giving me a new challenge, and that was to serve a broader audience. And that was a lot of fun. Really, what was amazing was we had no idea who we were impacting. Drake actually included My Quiet Storm guy. I believe it's out on his double album, I believe, Views. He actually included a full break from Our Quiet Storm guy. So he grew up listening to WBLK. I went backstage at a concert back when The Weeknd was on tour around 2016. And they invited me to go back and meet him, a few other industry people, and went back. And I mentioned my name and I said, man, you're from Toronto. I said, BLK in Buffalo all the way. And he was like, wait a minute, what's your name? I said, Skip Dillard, I did afternoons all 6 years. He went, grabbed everybody, hey, Skip from BLK. I ain't been there in years. And I was like, wow, this is in New York City. And it turns out he grew up listening to BLK. That was his R&B fix every day. And he said, really impacted, obviously, in some way or another, his final determination to make the artist thing work. And you look at where he is today, and it makes you feel really, really good.
That's a huge deal. I'm certain that listening to you and others on the radio made him really fall in love with music. All of this success ended up taking you to New York City. So talk me through what it was like when you came to New York City from having all of these successful stints in these other markets.
Sure. And I think, and mention a couple of other artists that were impactful in Toronto that we had a chance to help break. Cardinal Fishall, who DJ'd a party in New York for Cypher Sounds last month. Julie Black, who continues the Juno Award winner in Canada. She tours all over Canada and around the world. Socrates, great rapper. I mean, we really had fun there. So my wife, when we got married, I think we came together on the promise that we were both ready to get out of Buffalo. She had grown up there, born there, and I had been there 5 years when I met her. So we both decided, hey, let's see who can get the best job. I helped sign on a station, still on today, at West Palm Beach, X1023. And I was offered the job there. But my wife was offered a job at the same time. We just got married, and that was in Philly, the CBS TV affiliate. She was a TV reporter. And I said, look, Philly trumps West Palm any day. I said, well, looks like we're going to Philly. You get an opportunity at the CBS affiliate there, you got to go. She went to Philly, and we were commuting every week or so. I would fly to Philly, or she'd come to Buffalo when she was off. And I was talking to Sean Ross, who at the time was a senior manager at Billboard magazine, worked for their Airplay Monitor publication. And we were talking. He said, if you're interested in writing, he said, you talk about how much you like to write. He said, I have an opportunity for a top 40 editor if you're interested. Talked it over with the wife. I said, hey, I would just have to take a train to New York from Philadelphia every day, but I could be at home in time for dinner. I said, I think that'd be a lot better than seeing you every 2 weeks. And we wanted to start a family. So took the job. And again, just a God sent opportunity. Writing top 40 every week. I got to talk to heads of record labels. I got to talk to legendary DJs like Scott Shannon, heads of many of the companies. At the time was Clear Channel, Tom Pullman. You're interviewing people and writing articles every week. Quincy McCoy, who was a great program director in the 80s and 90s, and others who I would write about on a weekly basis. I'd cover new station launches. I would talk to PDs all over the country. Also have a chance to do panels and get things together at the Billboard conventions. So stayed there. And after a year, my wife, by that time, we had been commuting for about a year, and we had been there a year. My wife's contract was coming up at CBS, and it wasn't renewed. She had a whole lot of internal stuff going on. And I get offered an opportunity. I'm still fine at Billboard, loving it. She's thinking about what she wants to do. I get offered an opportunity to go to San Francisco and looked at everything there, flew in, interviewed for the job, got the job. We went there. A couple of months later, my wife got an opportunity to be a reporter at KTVU. It was a Fox 2 affiliate, local affiliate in San Francisco. Station was number one. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And she covered big stories. She was, out in the street. And, what was great was that we got to see all of the Bay Area. We lived in Oakland. We got to see San Francisco and Marin County. Took the wine train up in Napa. I mean, it was really, really a great place to live at the time. And we thought we were going to stay. We hoped we were going to stay. But 8 months after launching the station, they decided they wanted to sell it. Apparently, we had been a little too successful when it launched, because I was sent out there to launch the station for a company. And the company decided after we got going, they wanted to get out. So next thing you know, I'm paid out my contract, a part of it, and I'm figuring out what happens. I went to LA for a quick interview with, at the time was The Beat, but didn't really feel that was the right move. And I asked the COO at the time, I said, do you have any other markets that are open right now? And she said, yeah, we'll have a couple people call you. And that next week, I got a call from a wonderful woman, Carol Lawrence DeBruzen. And of all places, it was the Radio 1 cluster, a very strong cluster in Detroit. And flew there. My wife wasn't sold on going to Detroit, because when I was there the first time, I was single, had met her. And we wound up loving it, bought our first home. In many ways, coming home is always different when you go back to a place that you used to live. But I met a whole new set of friends, and I think it was even probably a better experience because I knew the things that I needed to know. And I was managing 3 stations, first time managing multiple stations. We were there going on our 3rd year. And there's a big opening in Washington, D.C. at WPGC. That is an Audacy station to this day. I work with Mike Street, the brand manager there, and format VP. And so, ironically, that was one station that everybody had on their radar, whether you were a jock or whatever, producer. If you worked at PGC, you were gold. CBS Radio, it was everything to every artist. Big Tigger, you had a gentleman named Flex, not the Flex of New York fame, but another Flex of DC fame, who was kind of like the Go-Go King, Michelle Wright. You had Donnie Simpson in mornings. The station was bigger than life. Long story short, I got the interview. It was a tough situation because they had started to have a lot of problems with the competitive landscape. The station had kind of been hit a bit in the ratings. They were always number one. Now they're number 5, they're number 3, they're number 4. The general manager is losing his mind, pulling his hair out, and I could tell the tenseness when I walked in for the interview. He offered me the job, much less money than I thought I needed to be making for the headache I knew I was going to run into.
Right.
These were big personalities. And they just hired Tigger back. My first job was to let Adimu know that he would have to either do nights or a music director. He wouldn't be there anymore. And I felt bad because Adimu was a Hamptonian like I am, Hampton University. So I'm like, oh, God, first week I had to go in and give him the bad news. He's not going to be doing afternoons. Tigger is. That did not go over too well. So I wound up losing Adimu. And it's just from there, it was just insane. Loved the station and the people, though. There were some headaches, but man, there were some incredibly talented and wonderful people. So I made the most of it. But 3 weeks after I'd been there, my wife said, something's wrong. I said, what? She said, you're not smiling. I said, oh, I'm not. I had no idea. And so I realized after a little while, we finally rented a house and we still couldn't sell our home. So we had to keep our house in Michigan. I was going crazy. I'm paying a huge rent and I'm paying a mortgage. And I'm like, oh my God, this is just unbelievably insane. You get to Washington, D.C., you get to your dream station. It's like, okay, we've arrived. And after 5 months, I'm like, I got to get the F out of here. So as God would have it, my longtime mentor and consultant, Tony Gray, to the rescue again, calls me up, oh, brother, what you doing at lunch? I said, working as usual every day, 7 days a week, 24/7. He said, can you make time to meet me up at BWI Rail Station in Baltimore? I said, yeah, of course, for you, yeah. So I get to Baltimore. It's Tony. It's the president of Intercity Broadcasting at the time that owned BLS. And it's Dion Livingston, the president general manager. So all three of them were sitting staring at me when I walk into the train station. They had taken Amtrak down from New York. So we're just talking. I'm like, this is weird. But I'm very happy because Charles Warfield is a Hamptonian. I always knew him over the years and would see him and idolized him because he was a general manager. He was a senior accountant at Universal Music. I mean, he big. We still talk to this day. So in the conversation, they said, look, we're not sure, but if we have something at BLS, are you interested? I said, yeah, just whatever. I said, I'll sweep the floors. I had never even dreamed of working for BLS. We all knew of BLS. It's legendary. It was beyond this world. Frankie Crocker, Jerry Bledsoe, Ken Spider Webb, and Vi Higginson, and all the people that had worked at that station over the years. I was like, that is like the holy grail of urban radio, period. So I was still catching hell, loving PGC, but hating the politics and all the insanity. And so we do our Women's Expo, and the general manager calls me. I didn't recognize his number. I didn't have him locked in from when we met at BWI. A couple of months had passed. I figured, I don't know what they're going to do. So I get a call. I'm in the middle of this Women's Expo. Hey, man, can I come by your expo? I said, who's? He said, Dion Livingston, met you at BWI. I said, man, Dion. I said, yeah, please. So put a ticket up front right now. He stays while we finish cleaning up. And we're talking, and, everybody's looking because a couple people recognize him. We're like, okay, well, I skipped talking to the GM in New York. So he says, hey, going to meet you for breakfast the next day. And we talked. He said, I'd like to make you an offer. He said, I know you're under contract, so what we'll do is we'll keep it quiet until your contract's up. He said, but I can send you the paperwork, a letter of intent, which you will sign if you agree to it. And then we'll move forward as soon as this is over. He said, but you have our commitment when you receive the paper. And once you sign it and, and send it over to us, we're good. Looked it over. It was the money I thought I should have been making in DC. And I was like, talked to my wife, and she's like, oh, God, I love DC. And But she said, I know what we're dealing with. And it was right on time because right as soon as my agreement was up, I gave my notice, thanked my boss, and prepared to go to BLS. They all thought I was going back to Detroit. Oh, Skip couldn't take it in DC, drove them crazy after a year, and they were stunned when they found out I was moving up to market number one. But it was such a blessing because shortly after I got there, I found out my wife was pregnant. We'd been trying for 7 years, and she had had fibroid surgery and all that, and got pregnant. So the timing was perfect. Working for Inner City, working for the founders, Percy Sutton's son, Pepe, Percy was very sick by the time I'd gotten to New York, but he had spoken at Hampton, and I'd heard him on several other occasions speak, and he was so eloquent. And he was the former Manhattan Borough president, and he had decided one of the best stories I heard about it was he had done a political rally in Manhattan to encourage the vote. It was a presidential or mayoral election. They'd helped David Dinkins, the first Black mayor of New York, get elected. And somebody told Mr. Sutton after the rally, he said, "Man, we got a great turnout. This is great, wasn't it?" And Percy Sutton, actually, it shows you his determination. He said, "Yeah, it was good, but imagine the turnout if we had a radio station." That was his determination that he was going to be a media owner. And when BLS came up for sale, well, actually, it was AM, WLIB AM came up for sale about 1972 or 73. They actually put in an offer and were working on everything, but at the last minute, they got thrown a caveat. There was a WLIB FM construction permit, and they wanted, I think, something like $1.2 million for it. Percy was getting ready to walk away, and his crew getting ready to walk away. They were like, "No, we're not buying an FM. Let's listen to AM. It's 1970 or whatever. 70, right. Everybody's listening to that." And Hal Jackson, co-founder of Inner City, famous DJ, was first African-American to break into WABC. He was doing nights with Alan Freed and Dick Clark were on the station. This is how big Hal was. And Hal said, "Look," he said, "always good to look at future technology. FM thing, people buying stereos, it may be something." And so they bought both. So anyway, long story short, I was able to work in that company before it went into bankruptcy several years after I got there. And wow, what an experience there and even after bankruptcy. But when I got there in 2008 to New York, Wendy Williams is doing afternoons. Jasmine Sanders is doing middays, who works with D.L. Hughley, his co-host today, for his syndicated show, and Steve Harvey in the morning. And that's when Steve was in New York like every other week. Vaughn Harper, legendary Quiet Storm host, was doing Quiet Storm. And so to see all of these people in the station at one time, it truly was mind-boggling. And over the years, had a chance to bring on Red Alert, Chuck Chillout, Marley Marl, people I grew up listening to mixtapes of, DJ Scratch. It was just an experience for me that I can't even explain, but it was an everyday learning experience. And just to be in New York and to see what that station meant to people and continues to mean to people. It was just an incredible experience.
This episode of Prepare for Takeoff is brought to you in part by Riverside, the platform that I trust to record studio quality podcasts right from my laptop. With Riverside, I get crystal clear audio and 4K video. Plus, it's super easy to use. Whether you're a beginner or a pro, Riverside helps your podcast sound amazing. Try it out for yourself. Click the affiliate link in our show notes and start recording like a pro with Riverside. After your storied career at BLS and all of the success that came with that, you left to launch 94.7 The Block, where you currently are. So how did that come to be, and what was that experience like?
So I had gone through several ownership changes at WBLS. After bankruptcy, we were put into a holding company. Then thankfully, Emmis Communications, that owned Hot 97, went ahead and purchased us. They decided to get rid of WRKS, Kiss FM a couple of years before, leased it out to ESPN. So they were in the market for another urban station to replace Kiss, which was an incredible station in its own right. And so became part of Emmis. And then in 2019, late 2019, we get called into the conference room that we had been sold to a company, Standard General, which was a hedge fund. And I was like, oh, bankers. And They said they're forming a corporation. They'll call it Media Co. And we are going to be on the board. So we'll be able to kind of help them navigate broadcasting. But they came in with an attitude that, hey, we're excited to work with you, excited to develop with you. From almost day one, they walked in and they were like, we're here to reinvent your business. And didn't talk to us, didn't ask anybody anything. Proceeded to bring in a ton of consultants, and those consultants would not make them happy with their money. They'd bring in another group of consultants, and they'd bring in another advisor, and they'd bring in another person, and then a president, and then the vice president. And so after a while, it was so volatile. I said, you know what, I gotta really start thinking about things. And that December, we had been hit by the pandemic, and I think the company would have been a little nicer place to work had we not been hit by the pandemic at the time the way we were. And it hurt them bad. It hurt everybody. And if you were new as a media owner during that time, God bless you. And that's why I hold no malice towards Media Co. at all, because they went through hell. You saw in many cases, 40 to 50% of your revenue just disappear overnight. No concerts, no anything. We're locked up. Nobody's doing this. Nobody's buying new cars. Everything just went off the books. And so they suffered mine. And at the end of 2020, they decided to move me to national partnerships. And so I was working with nonprofits, with unions, with both profit, nonprofit. And, I was successful in driving some revenue, but I knew that wasn't what I told the guys, I was like, guys, I'm a content person. I said, I'll do this. I, need my job, can't live in New York without a job. Mm-hmm. But I knew that, I got to figure out a way to do content. And so I was working hard at it. And then, this is why you try to get connected in your community. You support. When you can give a little money to something, you give it. You really try to be a steward of your community. I get an email Sunday night, random email from the president of the New York Urban League, Arva Rice, and we're a media partner today with the New York Urban League. And she said, Audacy, next across town, they're looking, or next door, really. We were a block away, this building from where Hot and BLS were at the time, LIB. She said, would you be interested in opportunities with Audacy? They want to up their management ranks. And I said, sure. And sent an email and wound up meeting for coffee in the West Village with the guy that is my boss to this day, Chris Olivera. Interviewed for a variety of jobs, digital and talent coach, and just a variety of stuff. And then all of a sudden, Chris said, give me a month here. We're working on something, and we may have something you might be interested in. I think you could really help us there if you're interested. So I get a call literally a day before they launch. And it turns out it's 94.7 The Block. And they said, listen to it and call us back. They launched at 1 p.m. I was on the phone with them by 1:15. Let's go. I had another offer during that time. A network offered me an opportunity, and I really mulled over both because I loved both opportunities, look good. But this was something I know how to do. This is something that I do every day. And a chance to do that again after having been in sales and marketing for almost a year. I said, man, I got to go. And I gave my resignation to Media Co. And, at first they were like, well, you can just get out of the building. You won't tell us where you're going. Or you're going down the block, or you're going to the block. And I said, well, I'm not going to say where I'm going. I said, but at least let me help you be together and get all my stuff together for you. So I go out of here and there's nothing I left behind or no information I didn't provide for you. And so I left on December 10th of 2021 and I started here on December 11th, 2021, took off for Christmas and came back in January. And, we have really put together a great team, great staff, and October will be 5 years since this station launched, and it's hard to believe it's been a very fast 5 years. But for a new format to survive for 5 years is really monumental, and we're really just getting started in many ways.
I remember when you first came on the air, I said, this is a breath of fresh air. Music for my generation. I can just put it on the block and just let it rock. You know what I'm saying? Skip, as we close out, I wanted to give you the opportunity to leave our viewers and listeners with 3 things that you feel will help them prepare for takeoff.
First and foremost, read. Reading helps you evolve. And, whether it is a book, and it can even be a book on fiction, it may be Dan Brown or something, but reading just gives you just such a broader way of thinking. Spread out to a point where you can talk on something Bill Clinton was always known for. He could speak on anything. He could speak on golf, but he could also speak on classical music. He could speak on jazz, but he could speak on hip hop. He could speak on economics. He could speak on history. And I think Barack Obama is one of those others I could say is in the same mode. Learn how to, in a room, connect with people that don't necessarily fit the things you're passionate about. Like, I love film, but I know some people like golf. I could care less about golf. I know I shouldn't, but I just don't play golf. But I try to learn enough about the sport. I don't play tennis, but I try to keep up with who the big people are. And, I don't want to mention a tennis player that just retired. So try to definitely keep up with current events, read, and always be prepared for God to put something on your lap that you've been dreaming of. Always prepare yourself for leadership roles. This is the first time in history. I was reading an article today on CEOs, a great time for leadership because people trust their employers, whether it's right to or not. They trust the heads of their companies they work for more percentage-wise than they do their religion, than they do the media leadership, or the current leadership in Washington right now. So that gives you a huge opportunity because people love leaders. They love people that they can follow. That's why influencers, people love to follow, whatever she's putting in her hair, they're going to get that. Mm-hmm. So, learn how to be truly a leader at whatever you do. I don't care if you own a janitorial service. I don't care if you're a lawyer. I don't care if you are a real estate developer or a construction worker. Try to be a leader, a military officer. Work for leadership. Man, woman, minority, whoever you are, we lack in leadership today. And there is an opportunity for you. AI can do a lot of things, but it certainly can't lead. But you can.
Skip, you're truly a leader, not only in radio, but in the community, and you're definitely the embodiment of Black excellence. I'm happy that we were able to just share your story, career in radio, and what drives you as far as community and things of that nature. And I'm certain that our viewers and listeners, they're going to want to continue to tap in with what you're doing, what the block is doing. What's the best way for them to stay tapped in with you?
Always on LinkedIn, Skip Dillard. I stay there probably more than I do on anything else. I do a lot of IG, but LinkedIn is my spot, man. Skip Dillard, follow me. I'll follow you back. And always enjoy meeting people in this industry and other industries and swapping stories and all that good stuff.
Skip, thanks for spending so much time with us. And I also wanted to thank our viewers and listeners. Whether you're watching us on YouTube or you're watching us on Spotify or you're listening to us on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Audible, iHeart, or Pandora. As you know, every week we want to continue to bring you proven professionals or rising entrepreneurs. And all of these conversations, just like this one, will help you prepare for takeoff. Skip, thanks for joining us, my brother.
Thank you, man. Good to see you today. And thank you for having me.